My name is Anna, and the day I realized my life was never really mine was the day I came home from the hospital and found my key didn't work. I remember standing there, still weak from anesthesia, my fingers trembling as I tried again.
Once. Twice.
3 times. The lock didn't budge. At first, I thought I was just tired. Maybe I was doing something wrong. Maybe I grabbed the wrong key. But then I saw the envelope taped to the door. Not even my name on it. Just Anna. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Anna, we think it's best if you find another place to stay. This situation isn't working anymore. Megan.
No explanation.
No warning.
No apology.
Just a quiet eviction written like a grocery list. For a moment, I genuinely thought this was some kind of mistake. That maybe this was meant for someone else. That any second, the door would open and my son Daniel would step out, confused, telling me there had been a misunderstanding. So I knocked. Of course I knocked. I knocked until my knuckles turned red, calling his name over and over again. Daniel. It's me. Open the door. Silence. Then, faintly, I heard movement inside. Footsteps. A whisper. And then Megan's voice. Sharp, controlled. Don't answer it. Something inside me cracked right then. I pressed my forehead against the door, my breath shallow, my chest tight. This was the same house I had helped pay for. The same house I cleaned, cooked in, babysat in. The same house where I kissed my grandson goodnight just 2 days ago before going into surgery. Now it felt like I was standing outside a stranger's home. I slowly lowered myself onto my suitcase, still sitting where I had left it that morning when Daniel drove me to the hospital. He had smiled then, told me not to worry, promised everything would be fine. Funny how quickly fine can turn into nothing. 3 years ago, after my husband died, Daniel had convinced me to sell my house. It doesn't make sense for you to live alone, Mom, he said. Come stay with us. You'll help with Ethan and we'll take care of you. It sounded logical, loving even. I sold the house I had lived in for 32 years. Every birthday, every Christmas, every memory with my husband, it all went into that sale. $210,000. That's how much I contributed when they decided to upgrade their home. Expand the kitchen. Add a second floor. Turn it into what Megan liked to call a forever home. Our forever home, she said. I guess she just forgot to mention I wasn't included in that forever. At first, everything felt right. I wasn't just Anna, I was Mom.
Grandma.
I baked cookies, picked Ethan up from school, read him stories at night. Daniel would hug me, thank me. Megan would smile, ask for my help. But slowly, things shifted. The smiles became shorter. The gratitude disappeared. My presence became expected, then tolerated, then inconvenient. Can you watch Ethan tonight? Turned into you're staying with him, right? Thanks for dinner, turned into silence. And eventually, conversations started happening without me. Plans made without me. Decisions about the house, about my life without me. Until one day, I was no longer part of the family. Just someone who lived there. Someone replaceable. Sitting there on that suitcase, I pulled out my phone and called Daniel. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I sent a message. I'm outside. I just got out of surgery. Please open the door. I watched as it changed from delivered to read. And then nothing. No reply. No call. No footsteps coming toward the door. That silence was louder than anything I had ever heard. The sun began to set, and the warmth of the day faded into a cold I could feel deep in my bones. I was still in loose hospital clothes, my body aching, stitches pulling with every movement. And suddenly, the truth became impossible to ignore. They weren't going to let me in. Not now. Not later. Not ever. I had $52 in my wallet. No plan. No home. At 69 years old, I stood up slowly, gripping the handle of my suitcase, every step sending a sharp pain through my abdomen. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. Not in front of that door. Not begging for a place that was supposed to be mine. The street felt unfamiliar, even though I had walked it hundreds of times. Like I had been erased from it somehow. After a few minutes, I reached a bus stop and sat down heavily on the bench. That's when the tears finally came. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, steady, unstoppable. How does a son do this? How does someone you raised, protected, sacrificed everything for decide you no longer matter? I thought about calling someone. But who? My sister lived across the country. Most of my old friends had either moved away or passed away. Except one. Clara. We had been friends for over 40 years. Through marriages, children, loss, everything. My hands shook as I scrolled to her name. I hesitated. Then pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Anna? How did the surgery go? I opened my mouth to speak. But instead I broke. Clara, I whispered, barely able to breathe. I don't have anywhere to go. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough for her to understand. Then her voice changed, firm, steady. Tell me where you are. I'm coming. And for the first time that day, I didn't feel completely alone. Clara's apartment wasn't big, but that night, it felt safer than any place I had ever known. I remember the way she rushed toward me when her car pulled up to the bus stop. She didn't ask questions right away. She didn't hesitate. She just wrapped her arms around me carefully, mindful of my condition, and said, "You're coming home with me." Not a home. Not my place. She said home. And for a second, I almost believed it. The ride was quiet. Not awkward, just heavy. The kind of silence that comes when too much has happened too fast. I stared out the window, watching streetlights blur past, trying to understand how my life had shifted so completely in just a few hours. That morning, I had a family, a house, a place in the world. By evening, I had a suitcase and nowhere to belong. When we got to her apartment, she helped me inside slowly, supporting my arm as I stepped over the threshold. The smell of chamomile tea and something warm, maybe cinnamon, filled the air. It was such a small, simple detail, but it nearly broke me. That smell meant care. It meant someone expected me. It meant I wasn't invisible. "You're staying here as long as you need," Clara said, guiding me to the couch before disappearing into the kitchen. No arguments. I wanted to protest. I didn't want to be a burden. Not again. But the truth was, I was too exhausted to pretend I had options. So I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That night, she set up a small bed for me in her spare room, if you could even call it that. It was more like a corner with a narrow bed, a lamp, and a dresser that had seen better days. But to me, it felt like a sanctuary, because it wasn't about the space. It was about being allowed to exist in it. As I lay down, my body ached in ways I couldn't even describe. The surgery pain was one thing, but the emotional weight pressing on my chest was something else entirely. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that note on the door. Heard Megan's voice telling someone inside to stay quiet. Felt the invisible wall between me and my own son. I didn't sleep much. And when morning came, reality was still there waiting for me. Clara was already in the kitchen, moving around quietly when I stepped in. She handed me a cup of tea without saying anything, her eyes studying me carefully. Not judging, not pitying, just present. "We need to talk about what happened," she said gently after a moment. So I told her everything. Not just about yesterday, about all of it. Selling my house, giving Daniel the money, helping with renovations, watching Ethan every day, cooking, cleaning, always trying to be useful, to not be too much, to not overstep. And then the slow shift, the coldness, the way I became less of a person and more of a function. Clara listened without interrupting. but I could see it in her face, the anger building. And you didn't sign anything? She asked finally. I shook my head. He's my son. The words sounded ridiculous the moment I said them out loud. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Anna, that doesn't protect you. That just made it easier for them. I knew she was right, and somehow that made it worse. Let's check your accounts, she said, just in case. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even thought about that. Daniel had helped me set up online banking after my husband passed. He said it was for convenience, for emergencies. Megan had access to one of my credit cards too, for groceries and things for Ethan. At the time, it felt normal, practical, family. Now it felt like a mistake I couldn't undo. Clara handed me her tablet, and I logged in. At first, everything looked fine. My savings account was still there. My pension had come in like usual. For a brief moment, I felt relief. Then I opened the credit card statement. And everything changed. Charge after charge scrolled down the screen. Designer clothing stores. High-end cosmetics. Expensive restaurants I had never even heard of. Thousands of dollars. All within the last month. My hands started shaking. I didn't buy any of this, I whispered. Clara leaned closer, reading over my shoulder. No, you didn't. The most recent charge had gone through just yesterday, while I was in surgery, while I was lying in a hospital bed, trusting that my family was waiting for me to come home. They knew, I said slowly, the realization hitting me piece by piece. They knew they were going to do this. Clara didn't soften it. She didn't try to protect me from the truth. Yes, she said. They planned it. Something inside me shifted then. Up until that moment, I had been hurt, confused, heartbroken. But now, I was starting to feel something else. Clarity. I picked up the phone. What are you doing? Clara asked. I'm calling the bank. The conversation was surprisingly calm. My voice didn't shake as much as I expected. Yes, I need to report unauthorized charges. Yes, I want to dispute them. Yes, freeze all my cards immediately. The woman on the other end explained everything carefully. What would happen next? How long it might take? What I needed to do. But all I really heard was one thing. They won't be able to use your cards anymore. Good. When I hung up, I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. I didn't feel powerful, but I didn't feel helpless either. And that was new. What now? Clara asked quietly. I looked up at her. I get my life back, I said. But even as I said it, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because getting my life back meant facing them again. Getting my belongings. Finding out what else they had done. And somehow building something new from what was left. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. Daniel. My heart jumped before I could stop it. For a split second, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe he's calling to apologize. To explain. To fix everything. I answered immediately. Daniel? There was no warmth in his voice.
Mom.
What did you do to the cards? And just like that, the illusion shattered. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. I froze them, I said. A pause. Then irritation. Megan tried to buy groceries. It got declined. I let out a quiet breath. Was she buying groceries at luxury boutiques too? Silence. Then, sharper now. You gave her permission to use those cards. For necessities, I replied. Not for this. Another pause. Longer this time. Just unfreeze them, he said finally. We'll talk about it later. Something inside me hardened.
No.
The word surprised even me. No, he repeated. You made it very clear I'm not part of your household anymore, I said slowly. So, you'll have to manage your expenses without me. His tone changed instantly. Mom, don't be difficult. Difficult. After everything. I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger exactly, but something stronger. Self-respect. I sold my home for you. I said. I gave you everything I had, and you locked me out after surgery. This isn't the time. It never is with you, I interrupted quietly. Silence again. Then cold.
Fine.
Do what you want. I will, I said. And I hung up. My hand was shaking. But this time not from weakness. The first week at Clara's place passed slowly, like time itself had thickened around me. Physically, I was healing. The pain from surgery was still there, sharp when I moved too quickly, dull when I stayed still too long. But it was manageable. What wasn't manageable was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the empty kind. The kind that comes when someone who used to be part of your everyday life disappears without explanation. Daniel didn't call again. No messages.
No επάλεγες.
No, how are you feeling? Just nothing. At first, I checked my phone constantly. Every vibration, every notification, I thought it might be him. But it never was. After a few days, I stopped checking as much. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I was starting to understand something I hadn't wanted to admit. He wasn't coming back for me. Clara didn't push me, but she watched me closely. She had this way of knowing when I was about to spiral, when my thoughts were turning against me. And every time, she would gently redirect me, ask me to help with something, suggest a walk, make tea, anything to keep me grounded in the present. You can't live in that moment forever, she told me one morning as we sat by the window. You have to decide what comes next. What if I don't know? I asked. Then you start with what you do know. And what's that? She looked at me steadily. You deserve better than what they did to you. That sentence stayed with me. Because for the first time, I wasn't just thinking about what I had lost. I was starting to think about what I deserved. A few days later, I told Clara I wanted to go back to the house. Not to stay. Not to argue.
Just to get my things. She didn't hesitate.
I'm coming with you. You don't have to, I said. Yes, I do, she replied firmly. You're not walking into that situation alone. The drive there felt surreal. Everything looked the same streets, the same houses, the same turns. But it didn't feel the same. It felt like I was visiting a place that used to belong to me in another life. When we pulled into the driveway, my chest tightened. Daniel's car was there. Megan's wasn't. Good, Clara muttered. One less problem. I wasn't so sure. My legs felt heavier with each step as we walked to the front door. I didn't knock this time. I rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, the door opened. Daniel stood there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked different. Tired. Tense. Like he hadn't been sleeping well. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual confidence was replaced with something uncertain. Mom, he said finally. I'm here for my things, I replied. Straight to the point.
No worms.
No small talk.
No pretending.
He hesitated, then stepped aside.
Come in.
Walking into that house felt like stepping into a distorted version of reality. Everything was familiar, but wrong. The furniture had been rearranged. Decorations I didn't recognize had appeared. Some of my things were missing entirely. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a place I had been erased from. My stuff is upstairs, I said, already moving toward the stairs. Actually, Daniel said, stopping me. We moved things around. A cold feeling spread through me. What does that mean? Megan needed the guest room for her office, he said, avoiding my eyes. And my belongings? They're in the garage. Of course they were. Clara made a quiet sound behind me, something between disbelief and anger. We walked to the garage in silence. There, stacked against the wall, were several cardboard boxes. That was it. My life, reduced to boxes. I approached them slowly, almost afraid to open them. The first one had clothes, folded carelessly. The second had books and a few personal items. The third. I stopped. Where are my photo albums? I asked. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. Megan packed everything. My husband's watch. I continued. My mother's jewelry? I'll have to ask her. They're not here, I said, my voice rising slightly. These are important things, Daniel. I said I'll ask her, he snapped. Clara stepped in immediately. That's not good enough. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. Look, I don't know where everything is, okay? I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself. I'm going upstairs, I said. He didn't argue this time. The house felt different as I moved through it. Colder, less alive. Or maybe that was just me. I went straight to the attic. I remembered exactly where I had stored some of my older belongings. Boxes I hadn't touched in years, but couldn't let go of. When I opened the first trunk, I felt a wave of relief. My wedding album, old photographs, letters, pieces of my life that hadn't been thrown away or packed into a random box. At least some things were still mine. As I gathered what I could carry, I heard Daniel's voice downstairs. He was on the phone. At first, I didn't pay attention, but then I heard a word that made me freeze. She showed up. I moved closer to the stairs without thinking. Yeah, with that friend of hers.
Pause.
I know what we agreed, but what was I supposed to do? Another pause. Then, no, I haven't told her yet. My heart started pounding. Told me what? She just had surgery, he continued, his voice lower now. This isn't the right time. Another pause. And then the words that changed everything. The nursing home. I stopped breathing. I must have misheard. I had to. But then, we're going to wait until after the sale, he said. Sale? The agent said we could get at least $600,000. My grip tightened on the box I was holding. They don't need to know how much came from her anyway. My vision blurred. This wasn't just about kicking me out. This was bigger.
Planned.
Calculated. They weren't just getting rid of me. They were replacing me. Selling the house. Moving on. And sending me away like something inconvenient. Like something old. Like something disposable. A nursing home. Without even asking me. Without even telling me. I must have made a noise, because Daniel suddenly stopped talking. I have to go, he said quickly. She might have heard. Panic rushed through me. I grabbed what I could and moved back toward the trunk, trying to look busy, trying to breathe normally. A few seconds later, I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Mom? I turned slowly. Did you find what you needed? He asked. His face looked tense.
Guilty.
Some of it, I said. But now, I knew. And nothing was going to be the same again. I didn't say anything right away. Not when Daniel asked if I found what I needed. Not when he helped me carry the boxes downstairs. Not even when we walked back into the garage where Clara was waiting, her expression already dark from what she had seen. Because something inside me had shifted again. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was a plan. A quiet, calculated plan to remove me from their lives completely and profit from it. And I needed to be very careful with what I did next. Is that everything? Clara asked, looking between the boxes and my face. No, I said calmly. But it's enough for now. Daniel avoided my eyes as he set the last box down. I turned to him then. Were you planning to tell me? He froze. Tell you what? He asked, but his voice gave him away. I held his gaze. About selling the house. The color drained from his face. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he sighed, like he was tired of the conversation before it had even begun. Mom, it's not what you think. That's interesting, I said quietly, because I also heard something about a nursing home. Clara went completely still beside me. Daniel's reaction was instant. His shoulders tightened, his jaw clenched. You were listening? I was in my own home, I replied. Or at least, I thought I was. That conversation wasn't meant for you, he said, his tone sharper now. I almost laughed. Of course it wasn't. Neither was the note on the door. Neither was the decision to throw me out. Neither was the plan to erase me from their future. Nothing was meant for me anymore. Then maybe you should have included me in the decisions about my life, I said. He rubbed his face, clearly irritated. We were trying to do what's best for you. A strange calm washed over me. What's best for me? I repeated. Yes, he said quickly. You've had health issues. You just had surgery. It's not safe for you to be alone. I had my gallbladder removed. I interrupted. Not my independence. Clara let out a quiet, approving breath. Daniel's frustration started to show more clearly now. You're not thinking rationally, he said. We were going to take care of everything. By selling the house I paid for? I asked. You didn't pay for the house, he snapped. Silence fell. The words hung in the air like something heavy and final. I felt them hit me, not like a surprise, but like confirmation. There it is, I said softly. What? The truth. He looked confused. My name isn't on the deed, I continued. That's what you mean, right? He didn't answer, because he didn't need to. We both knew. Despite the money I had given, despite the years I had lived there, despite everything I had contributed, I had no legal claim. I had trusted him, and that trust had cost me everything. Clara stepped forward then, her voice sharp and controlled. We're taking these boxes, she said. And Daniel, I strongly suggest you locate the rest of Anna's belongings. Because if they're missing, this becomes a very different situation. Daniel didn't argue. He just nodded stiffly. We loaded the boxes into Clara's car in silence. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. Through the open door leading back into the house, I could see part of the living room, and beyond it a desk. On that desk were papers. I couldn't read them clearly, but I saw enough. A brochure. A glossy image of smiling elderly people in a perfectly staged environment. Silver Meadows Assisted Living. And next to it, real estate listings. That was the moment everything became undeniable. Not just suspected, not just overheard. Confirmed. They had planned this. All of it. From the moment I sold my house to the moment they locked me out. The car ride back to Claire's apartment was quiet. But this time, the silence felt different. Not empty. Focused. Clara glanced at me a few times, clearly waiting for me to say something. Finally, she spoke. What are you thinking? I stared out the window. They thought I wouldn't find out, I said. They didn't expect you to fight back, she replied. I turned to her. And what if I don't know how? She smiled slightly. Then we figured out. That night, I didn't cry. Not once. Which surprised me, because everything I had learned that day should have broken me all over again. But instead, it did something else. It cleared something inside me. The confusion was gone. The doubt was gone. Even the desperate hope that maybe there had been some misunderstanding, that was gone too. What was left was simple. They had chosen to remove me from their lives. Now I had to choose what to do with mine. The next morning, I made an appointment with my financial advisor. His name was Martin Keller. He had been helping me manage my accounts ever since my husband passed away. Calm, professional, the kind of man who always explained things twice just to make sure you understood. When I sat down in his office and told him everything, his expression changed slowly, from polite concern to something much more serious. I'm very sorry, Anna, he said. I don't need sorry, I replied. I need to know where I stand. He nodded. We went through everything. My pension, my savings, my monthly expenses. The good news was, I wasn't completely ruined. The bad news was, I had far less than I should have had at this stage in my life. What about the money I gave Daniel? I asked. Martin hesitated. Without a written agreement, it's considered a gift. I nodded slowly. I thought so. There may be some options, he added carefully. but it would be complicated. I don't mind complicated, I said. I mind being erased. He studied me for a moment, then gave a small nod. Then we look at all possible angles. We spent the next hour going over numbers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. For the first time since everything happened, I felt like I was building something instead of losing it. When I left his office, I stood outside for a moment, breathing in the cool air. I didn't have my old life anymore. That was gone. But I had something else now. Awareness.
Control.
And maybe, just maybe, a second chance. Back at Clara's apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the boxes we had brought back.
Pieces of my life.
Some missing.
Some saved.
All of them mine. And for the first time, I said it out loud. They don't get to decide what happens to me anymore. Clara leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a small smile on her face.
Good, she said.
Because something tells me this isn't over yet. And she was right. It wasn't over. Not even close. The letter arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. At first, I almost didn't open it. It looked official, too official. Thick paper, printed return address, the kind of envelope that usually brings bad news or complicated problems. For a moment, I just stared at it, holding it in my hands, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. Clara noticed immediately. "You're going to open that eventually," she said from the kitchen. "I know," I replied. But knowing and being ready were two very different things. Still, I opened it. And within seconds, the ground beneath me shifted again. "Congratulations on the successful sale of your property." I stopped reading. My property? My hands started to tremble as I continued. The address listed was Daniel's house. The house I had helped pay for. The house I had been thrown out of. The house they had clearly sold. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was this. My name was listed as a participating party in the transaction. For a moment, I couldn't even process it. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. My name wasn't on the deed. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even known the house was officially being sold yet. And somehow, I was part of the paperwork? "Clara," I said slowly, "you need to see this." She took the letter from my hands and read it quickly, her expression darkening with every line. "That's not possible," she said. "That's what I thought." She looked up at me. "Unless someone made it possible." The words landed heavily between us. "You think they?" I couldn't even finish the sentence. "I think you need a lawyer," she said firmly. That afternoon, I found myself sitting across from a woman named Patricia Lawson. She specialized in elder law. Sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind of presence that made you feel like she had seen everything and wasn't surprised by any of it. I handed her the letter. She read it once, then again. "This is serious," she said finally. "I didn't sign anything," I told her. "At least, not that I remember." She looked at me carefully. "Did your son ever ask you to sign documents when you moved in with him?" I hesitated. "Yes, but he said it was for tax purposes. Something about documenting the money I contributed." She nodded slowly. "That could be relevant." My stomach dropped. "You think they used that?" "I think it's possible those documents were used in ways you didn't understand," she said. "Or altered." The word hung in the air. Altered.
Forgery. Fraud.
Things I never imagined I would be associating with my own son. "What happens now?" I asked. She folded her hands on the desk. "Now we verify everything. And then we confront them." A wave of anxiety rushed through me. "I don't know if I can do that." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "You've already done the hardest part," she said. "You survived what they did to you. This is just the next step." Just. It didn't feel like just. It felt like walking straight into the center of everything I had been trying to rebuild myself from. But at the same time, something else was there. Not fear. Not exactly. Something stronger. Resolve. We drafted a formal letter requesting a meeting.
Clear. Direct.
Impossible to ignore. It stated that I had reason to believe my name had been used improperly in the sale of the property and that I expected a full explanation, with legal representation present. We sent it by certified mail. No avoiding it. No pretending it never arrived. 3 days later, my phone rang. Daniel. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment before answering. Hello. What is this? He demanded immediately.
No greeting. No hesitation.
Why are you involving a lawyer? I leaned back in my chair. I think you know exactly why. A pause. Then sharper. This is unnecessary. We can handle this ourselves. We had a chance to handle things as family, I said calmly. You chose not to. That's not fair. Locking me out after surgery wasn't fair. I interrupted. Planning to put me in a nursing home without telling me wasn't fair. Using my money wasn't fair. Should I continue? Silence. For a moment, I thought he might hang up. Instead, he sighed. Fine, he said. We'll meet. We will, I replied. With lawyers. Another pause. Then, reluctantly, okay. We agreed on a neutral location, a private room in a restaurant. Neutral ground. Not his house. Not Clara's apartment. Not anywhere tied to the past. The days leading up to the meeting were strange. I expected to feel overwhelmed.
Panicked.
Broken. But instead, I felt focused.
Clear.
Like everything that had happened had stripped away something unnecessary, leaving only what mattered. Clara helped me prepare, not just practically, but emotionally. Don't let them rewrite the story, she told me. You know what happened. Stick to that. The night before the meeting, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I didn't want to look weak. Not for them. Not for myself. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who had sat on that suitcase weeks ago. She looked steadier, stronger, not because the pain was gone, but because I had learned how to stand with it. The next day, Patricia picked me up. We went over everything again in the car. Let them talk first, she advised. People reveal more than they intend when they're trying to defend themselves. I nodded. When we arrived, Daniel and Megan were already there. So was their lawyer. Megan looked exactly as I remembered, perfectly put together, controlled, polished. But there was something different now. Tension. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. We sat down. No small talk.
No pretending.
Patricia began. We're here to discuss the recent sale of the property and my client's involvement in that transaction. Their lawyer responded smoothly, like he had done this many times before. My clients maintained that Anna had no legal ownership of the property. Her financial contribution was a gift. He slid a document across the table. Patricia glanced at it briefly. This document acknowledges a financial contribution, she said. It does not legally define it as a gift. Then she placed the letter, the one I received, on the table. However, this does raise a different question. Why was my client listed as part of the sale? Daniel shifted in his seat. Megan's composure tightened slightly. It was an administrative error, their lawyer said quickly. Interesting, Patricia replied calmly. Especially since we also have documentation bearing my client's signature related to the transaction. She placed another paper on the table. My heart pounded. I didn't sign that, I said quietly. And I knew it. Without a doubt. The room went still. For the first time, Megan looked genuinely unsettled. Daniel looked pale. Their lawyer's confidence slipped just slightly. That's a serious claim, he said carefully. It's a factual one, Patricia replied. Silence stretched across the table. And in that silence, everything became clear. They knew what they had done. And they knew they had been caught. Finally, Daniel spoke. What do you want? I looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as my son. Not as the boy I raised. But as the man who made these choices. I want what's fair, I said. And for the first time since all of this began, I meant it. What's fair, I repeated, looking directly at Daniel, is that I get back what I put into that house. The room stayed silent. No one rushed to respond this time. No quick excuses.
No interruptions.
No attempts to redirect the conversation. Because now it wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about facts, numbers, and consequences. I contributed $210,000. I continued, my voice steady. That money came from the sale of my home. The home I lived in for over 30 years. The home I gave up because I trusted you. Megan shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable. That money was a gift, she said, trying to regain control of the situation. I turned to her slowly. Was it? I asked. She held my gaze, but I could see the tension in her expression. Because from where I'm sitting, I continued, it looks more like an investment that was used, manipulated, and then erased. Daniel let out a breath, rubbing his temples. Mom, this is getting out of hand. No, I said quietly. This is exactly where it needs to be. Patricia stepped in then, her tone calm but firm. My client is prepared to resolve this without further legal action, she said. However, given the circumstances, including the unauthorized use of her identity in the sale of the property, we are fully prepared to pursue this in court if necessary. Their lawyer leaned forward slightly. And what exactly is your client proposing? Patricia glanced at me. This was my moment. Not hers. Not theirs.
Mine.
I want my money returned, I said, with reasonable interest. Megan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. That's ridiculous. I didn't react. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I simply held her gaze. Because for the first time, I didn't need to convince anyone. The truth was already in the room. Daniel looked between us, clearly feeling the pressure. How much? He asked finally. Patricia answered. With interest, the total comes to approximately $230,000. Silence. Then Megan shook her head immediately. That's not happening. Their lawyer placed a hand on the table, signaling for calm. We can discuss a settlement, he said carefully, but that number is excessive. I leaned back slightly, watching them. They were calculating now. Not dismissing. Not denying. Calculating.
Good.
Because that meant they understood something important. This wasn't going away. Daniel whispered something to Megan. She responded sharply. Their lawyer leaned in, speaking quietly to both of them. For a few minutes, they spoke in low voices, their words blending into a tense murmur. I sat there, completely still, and for the first time since everything began, I felt something unexpected.
Peace.
Not because the situation was resolved, not because the pain was gone, but because I was no longer the person sitting outside that locked door, waiting to be let in. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was deciding. Eventually, their lawyer straightened. My clients are prepared to offer $160,000 as a full and final settlement. Patricia looked at me, not pushing, not advising, just waiting. I thought about it, about the number, about what it represented. It wasn't everything, but it was something. More importantly, it was acknowledgement, proof that what they did had consequences, proof that I hadn't imagined it, proof that I wasn't invisible. I nodded. We accept, I said. Megan exhaled sharply, clearly relieved. Daniel looked conflicted, but I didn't focus on them, because this wasn't about them anymore. As Patricia and their lawyer worked through the details, timelines, signatures, agreements, I allowed myself to sit back and breathe. Really breathe. For the first time in weeks. When everything was finalized, I stood up.
So did they.
For a brief moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then Daniel looked at me. Mom. I met his eyes. And I waited. Not for an apology. Not for an explanation, just to see what he would say. But whatever words he had, they never came. He looked down, and that was enough. I turned and walked away. Not angry, not broken,
Just done.
the money came through 6 days later. I remember staring at the number on my account screen for a long time, not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. It wasn't just money. It was closure. It was independence. It was a foundation. And for the first time in a long time, it was mine. Clara hugged me when I told her. I knew you could do it, she said. I shook my head. I didn't. But you did anyway, she replied. And that was the difference. Over the next few months, everything began to change. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but steadily. I found a small apartment. Nothing luxurious, but clean, bright, with a little balcony where the sun came in during the afternoons. I bought simple furniture. Nothing extravagant. Just things that felt like they belonged to me. I created a routine. Morning coffee by the window. Short walks. Cooking for myself. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It sounds small, but when you've lost control of your life, small things become everything. Clara remained my anchor. But slowly I started building something of my own again. I joined a local group for people going through major life changes. At first, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to talk about what happened. I didn't want to be that person. But when I finally did, something shifted. Because I wasn't alone. Not even close. There were others. Different stories. Different betrayals. But the same feeling. The same question. What now? And slowly, week by week, that question started to change. From what now to what's next. One afternoon, after one of those meetings, Clara said something that stayed with me. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else, she said. What would you do if you finally did something just for you? I didn't have an answer right away, but the question stayed. And a few weeks later, it turned into something real. It started small.
Just an idea.
Then a plan. Then something more. Because it turns out starting over doesn't mean starting from nothing. It means starting from experience. From strength. From everything you survived. And as I stood in my small kitchen one evening, sunlight falling across the counter, I realized something I never thought I would feel again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building a new life on my terms. And this time, no one was going to take it away from me.